Welcome to The Explainer. You ever just get that feeling that something is, well, off? We're told we live in the most advanced society in history, right? So why are so many of us struggling? Why are anxiety, depression, and chronic illness just soaring? Today, we're diving into Dr. Gabor Maté's incredible answer to that exact question from his book, The Myth of Normal. His argument? What our culture calls normal is actually what's making us sick. Now, I know what you're thinking. This sounds like something out of a fairy tale. And, well, it is. But this quote from a character named Zoran the Dragon actually gets right to the heart of what Dr. Maté is talking about. It's this simple, powerful reminder that our culture is always pointing us towards things to make us happy, when what we really, truly need is connection. And that's all starts with connecting back to ourselves.
So let's get right into it. The core idea of his work, which is pretty provocative, the myth of normal.
Okay, so here's the big, kind of shocking idea at the center of it all. What if the way we live, the 9-to-5 grind, the constant pressure to buy more, achieve more, isn't just stressful, but is actually profoundly unnatural? Mate's whole argument is that we are systematically taught from day one to ignore our most basic human needs, and that this deep disconnection is the real reason so many of us are struggling with our health.
And you know, this isn't some brand new, out-of-the-blue idea. This quote here is from the psychologist Erich Fromm, and he wrote this way back in 1955. His point was so simple but so powerful. Just because a million people are doing the same unhealthy thing, that doesn't magically make it healthy. It doesn't make them sane. Maté really just takes this idea and runs with it, arguing that our entire culture is kind of built on a shared, normalized dysfunction.
So, how does this dysfunction actually show up in our lives? For Maté, it all comes down to one single core problem. We're living in a culture of disconnection. And when he says disconnection, he's not just talking about, not spending enough time in nature. He argues the most damaging disconnection is from ourselves. It's that process where we learn to quiet our gut feelings, to push down our real emotions, all just to fit in, to be normal. And the scale of this problem, it's huge. Just look at this number. 70% of adults in the US are on at least one prescription drug. Let that sink in for a second. In one of the wealthiest societies ever, the majority of us are unwell. For Maté, this is not a coincidence. It is the direct, inevitable result of a culture that disconnects us from what makes us healthy. So, if our culture is mad, as Maté calls it, how does it keep itself going? Well, he says it does it by teaching us to adopt certain ways of being. He points to 3 key traits that this whole system really depends on. And here they are: separation from self, consumption hunger, and hypnotic passivity. You can probably see how they all feed into each other, right? It kicks off with feeling cut off from who we really are. That creates a kind of emptiness, which we then try to fill with stuff. And that ultimately leads us to just passively accept the very system that's causing all the trouble in the first place. Let's break them down. All right, first up, separation from self. This is that little nagging voice in your head, the one that tells you you're not good enough, you should look different, or that you're not supposed to feel sad or angry. When we start to believe all these impossible ideals we see in the media, we learn to feel ashamed of our actual bodies and our real feelings. We literally cut ourselves off from who we truly are. And that feeling of inadequacy, it's the perfect fuel for the second trait, consumption hunger. That inner void has to be filled with something, so we start looking outside ourselves. The entire advertising industry is built on this very principle. Think about it. They're not really selling you a product. They're selling you a cure for a feeling of not enoughness that they helped create. And finally, all of this leads to what he calls hypnotic passivity. I mean, just think about our collective inaction on massive issues like climate change, or how easily we can just accept official stories without asking any questions. Maté calls it a mass hypnosis. We see things happening that we know are harmful, but we feel totally powerless to do anything about it. And that passivity is exactly what lets the damaging system just keep on running. Okay, that is a pretty bleak diagnosis, right? So what's the cure? What do we do? Well, the good news, according to Maté, is that this doesn't require some giant global revolution.
The change actually starts with each one of us. It all begins with a journey back to authenticity.
Maté calls the state of just going through the motions a trance. And waking up from that trance, it's not something that just happens once and you're done. It's a daily practice. It starts the second we decide to take personal responsibility, to become aware of our own automatic unconscious patterns.
So the million-dollar question is, how do you actually do that? I mean, where does a person even start to untangle all this stuff? Well, thankfully, the book gives us a really practical tool to get started. This right here, this is your starting point. These 5 questions for self-inquiry, think of them like tools you can use to cut through all that cultural noise. For instance, just asking yourself, what am I not saying no to? That can instantly show you where you're letting your boundaries get crossed. And trying to uncover the hidden story behind why you do what you do, that gets to the really deep beliefs you picked up a long, long time ago. This isn't just a list, it's like a roadmap back to the real you.
And this path, it eventually leads to a final and pretty challenging choice. Because being authentic, being your real self, it's not always easy. It might mean disappointing people. It might mean changing relationships that were built on the false you. So the question Maté leaves us with is this: which kind of pain will you choose? The dull, chronic pain of always suppressing yourself, or the sharp but liberating pain of authenticity?